fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Hope you're having a kick-ass day. As a reminder, if you're loving this podcast, please review us or wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with your friends. The more humans we can reach, the better. And today, I'm excited to bring you a conversation with my man, Pete. How are you, Pete?
I'm good. Good to be back as always. Excited to chat.
Yeah. Good to see you. As before we started recording this podcast, Pete and I were just kind of sharing what was going on with our week, and we both had very similar experiences over the last 2 weeks. So we thought, you know what? Let's actually talk about that today. And so I'll give the framing for this, and then maybe Pete, you can kind of dive in with a little more detail. But we both got onto this platform where we record called Riverside, and was like, "How's your week going? How's your week going?" And both of us were like, you know what? We're a little overwhelmed. We're a little spread a little too thin, feel like there's a lot of shit on our plate, and we're kind of half-assing a lot of it. I'll speak for myself. That was the word I used. That like there's too much on my plate for me to do it all well. And I just feel like there's so many things I'm just kind of half-assing, and I hate that feeling of knowing I can do a better job, but I just am spread too thin to give it all the time and attention a thing deserves. And I get it from time to time. I think like many of you listeners do. And then I was like, "Pete, how are you doing?" He was like, "Yeah, same." Like we both were in a very similar spot. So we thought we'd talk about that today. Talk about what happens when our plate is too full and we get overwhelmed. What do we actually do? What do we wish we did instead? How do we eventually get out of it and manage it for ourselves? So, Pete, maybe kick us off by just talking about what's going on for you right now. What tends to be your default reaction when this happens?
Yeah, well, we opened our pre-recording conversation with me kind of gloating in excitement that my kids left for school today. Yeah. And I put them on the bus this morning and I left for work. And then I had this instantaneous moment of guilt because it's like, why am I trying to accelerate my kids' lives so dramatically? Why am I appreciative of the fact that we just escaped the summer, which is their favorite thing in the world? So I have these constant moments of like, slow down, wait, hurry up. I need my free time back. And I don't feel awesome about that. But what I think the parents listening to this might be able to relate to is the fact that as much as there are plenty of summer camp and entertainment options over the course of the summer, for some reason they don't make them available during the last 1 to 2 weeks of the summer. And I just came out of that stretch. And I shouldn't say for some reason. I know very well that most of the people that staff the summer camps also work in the school systems. It's a great way for them to make some extra cash in addition to that income. And the reality is that school doesn't just start, like they don't just open doors and kids come pouring in and then they're like, we're going to figure it out. No, they've been working for that week and a half to 2 weeks while us parents have been scrambling, trying to figure out how to keep our kids entertained while running our business. And that was the impetus from my stress. I've been with my wife bouncing my kids back and forth between grandparents and just different entertainment options and kids' birthday parties and just all kinds of stuff. And in the meantime, I was leaving work earlier than I should, or that I ideally do on certain days, or showing up later than I ideally do, as my wife and I are splitting days. It meant that the extra time that was usually allocated toward consuming content, so say listening to podcasts or reading or even writing, stuff like that is what gets wiped off the plate for me when I start to get to this kind of level of stress. And as a result, I'm less productive from a content creation standpoint. And that stresses me out as well. So as we kind of kicked this idea around, I said, Michael, I'm happy to talk to you about what I do, but what I do is not what I'm going to advise other people do. This will definitely be a do as I say, not as I do, because the governor for me on this is really, I push it all the way to the point where finally I get home and my wife is like, what the hell is wrong? And for me, I just get very quiet. I'm so up in my head, managing my to-do list, thinking about the next day, that she can usually tell. And it's frustrating to me because I'm like, I wasn't mean to you. I got the kids on time. I did all the things I said I was going to, but I don't realize that I have resting bitch face while I'm doing it because I've just got too many balls in the air. And that's kind of where you and I both seem to be at coming into today's conversation. And I'm happy to discuss the solutions that I know I should be doing. And I'm embarrassed to admit what I do, which is not ask anyone for help.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're not alone, my friend. I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this kind of nodding their head as they listen because we all got to that place where, like, well, I'm juggling all the balls and it's just making me miserable, but I said I'd juggle them, so here I am. I'm freaking juggling them. And it takes someone else to be like, are you all right? You look so frustrated, sad, tired, whatever that thing is, juggling all those balls. And, and sometimes it requires that kind of outside reflection, that outside nudge, that outside kick in the pants or hug to be like, you don't look happy. And so I think that's a pretty common experience. And mine's pretty similar actually. That these days I'm not juggling kids, but I've had a lot of other projects on my plate. Right, I'm in a doctoral program, coaching a ton with business unicorns. Transitioning some of our business unicorn staff right now, so in the hiring process, doing lots of interviews. Have a bunch of side clients that I have proposals I'm working on for other clients outside of Business for Unicorns, doing that kind of work. Plus, I have to spend time with my husband, trying to make the most of summer, projects going on in my house, right? All the things that we have in life going on. And my reaction to some of those, this is the part that I'm not proud of, is I tend to kind of keep it all on my plate for way too long. And as I said before, I just start half-assing stuff. It's like, okay, well, I did this. I technically checked it off. And it's like more than a shitty first draft. It's like an absolutely embarrassingly shitty first draft. Or, yes, I sent that proposal to that client, but I gave it half the amount of thought that I should have. Or like, yes, I did that assignment for school, but I should have spent twice as long and done 4 times more research than what I did. And then I get this sense of shame that I'm producing below what I'm capable of. The sense of shame that someone's going to find me out that I only did half the work that I really should have. Right? There's that kind of imposter syndrome that pops in. Even though I know I could do better than average work in some of these things, not all. I know that I'm doing even worse than I'm capable of. That's the thing that eats at me. And it usually takes either someone calling me out on it and being like, yeah, you said you were going to get this done for like the last 2 months. Or it takes me feeling so ashamed that I just break down to my husband and be like, I'm terrible. How has no one noticed? Right? Like it usually takes like a breakdown or someone kind of calling me out. And what we can do next is I'm also happy to talk about what I do instead and how I climb out of it once I have the wherewithal. But I just want to plus one you, my friend, and say when I get overwhelmed, I do a whole series of shit that I am not proud of. And I'm sure you'll say, we do find our way out of it, right? This is almost always a temporary state. I don't feel like I'm here very often. A few times per year, maybe I get in over my head and have to climb out to this extent. And now I will say, if anyone is feeling like you're always underwater, you never come up for air, right? That's a different topic. Right? I think that's something that's more long term like that, more ongoing, more chronic. I think that's maybe a separate conversation because there's probably more at play there than I think what we're talking about today is we have these ebbs and flows of feeling underwater or above water, and this is and we're not here very often. Is that a fair assessment for you as well?
Yeah, I'm definitely here more often than I'd like, but I don't
Sure.
live in a state
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
overwhelmed panic.
Totally.
It's I don't know. It's so hard to take that 30,000 foot view and see
Yeah.
and ask myself, am I in kind of a seasonal rut,
Yep.
or is this an extended problem? For
Yeah.
me, the way I climb out of the hole is typically by taking control of my schedule, so living my days in more of a proactive way than a reactive way,
Yep.
and honestly employing some of the stuff you guys gave me when I came to Time Ninja a couple years ago. I have
Hmm.
admittedly not done Time Ninja online in our content library because I attended it in person about 6 weeks before COVID. It was like the last
Yeah.
normal thing I did with my life before
How
March
funny.
of 2020, and
Let me just
I still
interrupt for a
use
second and
those.
just say for listeners who don't know what we're talking about, Time Ninja is a course we created at Business for Unicorns many years ago on personal productivity and kind of time management. It's one of the first ones we actually kind of ever made and did as part of Business for Unicorns, and we now have an online version that's available to our Unicorn Society members. That's what Pete's referencing. So sorry, keep going, my friend.
Yeah, my apologies. I shouldn't be assuming the knowledge of the listener. I still to this day use the templates you guys handed out, kind of my own
Mhm.
interpretation of it for managing my days. But for me, when I'm overwhelmed with my to-do list, I tend to think of it as a whole. Like, when am I going to get all of these things off the to-do list? And the
Yep.
only thing that quickly fixes it is getting a few wins. And so I find that if I can win the day, and we got onto
Yeah.
this call and I said, Michael, I feel like I'm winning right now. My kids got on the bus at 8:15 this morning. I got here and I started chipping away at the to-do list, and I hit it up to this point. Every 15 or 30-minute increment I had outlined, I've been hitting. And
Yep.
I should say, I sprinkle in walks where I literally like walk around the building that we work in here at CSP just to stretch the legs and clear my head. And I know that if I feel like I won my to-do list, I just checked every box today. When I get home tonight, I'll just be energized to do it again tomorrow. Whereas for the last
Mm,
several days, it's been like, all right, how am I going to reschedule the recording time with Keeler to allow for me to make it to the open house for first grade, which would allow for me to be there in time to pick up Colin from the 9-year-old birthday party that he's at, which will allow for me to get home and check the work of the person who's filling in at the front desk before I go to bed to make sure that all the payments got processed today. And
yeah.
that reactive mindset is what costs me sleep and is the reason I'm bald and gray and looking older these days, because I've spent too much of the last several years in that state.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're more handsome than ever, and I think that you're not alone, right? I think that the idea of going from being really reactive and and your life happening to you, as opposed to being proactive, instead of taking that kind of all or nothing thinking, like I'm going to get all my to do list done, versus like I need to find a few wins. Like, I think that's a really great change in mindset. It's a change in strategy for how you spend your time, right? Thinking of like, how do I set up tomorrow to be a day that I can win? What's realistic for me to achieve? How do we get some wins on the board? Like, I think that's super valuable to listeners. Yeah, that's super valuable. What do you say to for people? I'm just going to probe your strategy a little bit more. What do you say for people who, unlike you or me, maybe don't have as much autonomy in how they spend their work hours? Right? Because I think a lot of our listeners, are maybe not owners. A lot of them are people who are on the floor a lot, work a 40-hour week or some sort of 9 to 5 schedule, or, you know what I'm saying, who have more of a fixed schedule. Whereas you and I, if 2 weeks from now I want my schedule to be completely different, I can more or less make that happen. I know you could too if you really needed to. And I think a lot of people are not in a position. So what do you say to them in terms of how they reorganize or structure their day? Hello, my friends. Michael here. I'm interrupting this podcast briefly to make sure you heard about an upcoming course we're offering at Business for Unicorns. The course is called Coaching Conversations, and it's about helping you have confident conversations when the stakes are high and emotions are high. The course has been one of our most popular courses we've ever offered at Business for Unicorns, and I teach it. It's 2 days long. It's happening on Zoom, so all of you are welcome to join, and it is Friday, October 14th and October 15th. 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. You can learn more at businessforunicorns.com/coaching conversations. And if you sign up by October 2nd, you'll save $300 on registration, which is pretty rad. So I hope to see you all there. Bye.
So I think of this from the perspective of my employees, and it's probably the same thing I should be saying to myself, which is ask for help. I mean,
Yeah.
I never go to people and say, "Hey, I'm stressed. I'm feeling like I'm going to have a hard time hitting kind of these benchmarks that I'm chasing, and my workload's got me a little overwhelmed." And I know that in my group, kind of my core community, if I came to you and I was like, Keeler, I am underwater. I'm sorry, I can't schedule this call, or I don't think I'm going to write this thing. I
Yep.
know that you wouldn't guilt me. You'd say, I
Yep.
got it. Let's work through this. And I know for a fact that if I had an employee walk into my office, knock on the door and say, hey, can I have 2 minutes? And that's like the worst. You know that feeling when they're like, I need to talk to you, boss. If
100%.
they
You know
came
what's
in,
coming. Yeah.
yes, exactly. But they gave me something other than I want to give my notice. And they gave me the, hey, I'm feeling terribly overwhelmed by my programming volume. I'm having a hard time getting it done during my traditional hours, and it's bleeding into my personal life.
Yep.
Never in the history of that conversation have I said, how dare you? Well, you need to
Yeah.
be better. No, it takes some nerve to walk in here and say that, because it's already making them anxious. And I sit them down and I say, let's get this right. Let me pull John in here. We're gonna modify the whole schedule to make sure that you're not doing any of this off the clock, because that's not what you signed up for. And I realize that we will collectively bend over backwards to alleviate that stress in that moment, so they walk out feeling good about where they're at. So I think that we assume ourselves to not have much autonomy, but our employers are probably willing to play that game. and get creative and empathize. I mean, just be sympathetic to where you are at when you come into the room to have those conversations. And so my guess is the people who are saying, well, I don't have control over my schedule, that's not the freedom I have. Most of them have not tapped on their boss's office and told them, hey man, I'm stressed. And honestly, that's all it takes with me as a manager is just to put it out there. And I'll say, I'm so sorry. I'm also stressed. And forgive me. I didn't read that on your face. I haven't seen it. I haven't asked you how you're doing because I've been so up in my own head, worried about how I'm not doing a good job, that it's this trickle down effect is amazing and it's huge. But the only thing it takes to fix it is just conversation. Just put it out there. I'm tired and stressed. Can somebody please help me? And obviously that's a much bigger thing in like just in the world in general. We should all be asking for help in more than just like to-do list stress. But
Sure.
In this conversation, I guess my insanely long answer turned short for you is, have you asked your boss if they will troubleshoot this with you? Because they probably are a lot more flexible than you think.
Yeah. I think that's a really great takeaway, Pete, because, right, I think bosses like ourselves who try to be a place where we can welcome those kind of conversations, like there's nothing that gets me more excited as a boss who's someone that trusts me enough to tell me they're not doing a good job. Right? That just tells me so much about the kind of safe and brave space I've made for them, the kind of communicator they think I am, that they're comfortable telling me, the person who, quote, signs their checks, that like, I am not nailing right now. I am super stressed. I'm underwater. I can't get my shit together. That is such an exciting conversation. And I hope, all the listeners out there who have bosses, I hope you have a boss like that. Not that you and I are claiming to be perfect, but I hope you have a boss that actually treats you like a collaborator and wants to help you with that stress. And if you're a boss listening, and that's not how you treat people who walk into your office claiming to be stressed, you should reconsider that. Think about how you can be the kind of boss that welcomes people walking into the door and saying, listen, I am stressed and overwhelmed and I need help. And trying to be the compassionate person who offers them as much help as you can. Yeah. I think it's a great takeaway, Pete. Yeah, I would say my solution for how I dig myself out, I think, again, this is not a commercial for Time Ninja. We're not even selling it right now, but I go back to a lot of stuff on that as well. I typically, what I do is I put about an hour on my calendar and I do a time audit. Actually, I have one scheduled to do next week because I knew it was coming up. I knew I was getting underwater. And so I put an hour on my schedule to do a time audit. And the time audit is exactly what it sounds like. I go through and make a list of all the things that are on my plate in a given moment. If I don't have it organized already, right? But what I'll do is I'll take all the things that are on my plate personally, professionally, projects I've committed to, tasks I've committed to. I just write it down all on one piece of paper. Right. This is not how I manage my to-do list on a regular basis, but for a time audit, I put it all on one piece of paper. Then I put down about how much time I think I'm spending on it all in an average week. Right. This is just an exercise, right? This is just a way to kind of get it out of my head, stop ruminating or stewing on it, and just get it out on paper so I can be in dialogue with this information. And so write it all down, put next to it how much time I think I'm spending on it, add it all up. Typically when I add it all up, it's way more hours than I even want to be awake in a week, right? It's more hours than it's humanly possible to spend on all the tasks. Then what I do is I take, we teach this in Time Ninja, but it's very old strategy. It's many people know this as the Eisenhower matrix. It was also made famous through Stephen Covey, but it's that matrix that 4-block quadrant model of urgent versus important tasks. Yep. So it's something's urgent or not urgent, important, not important. And I want to look for the tasks that are both urgent and important and prioritize those. I'll go through the rest of the model, but I won't go through the rest of the model because you can talk about each quadrant. It could be a whole other podcast. But I use that lens of how important is each task, how urgent is each task. Then I go down the list and decide whether it's something I want to do, whether it's something I want to delay, whether it's something I want to delegate, or something I delete. So I use the 4 Ds. Right. I literally do this. This is not just an exercise that we teach. And Mark and I have been doing this for years. This is why we taught it in Time Ninja. And those 4 Ds of do, delay, delegate, delete is my action plan. If it's urgent and important, it's absolutely getting a do. Right. If it's something that I know I can ask for help with, to your point, if I can ask for help from anyone, then I'll delegate it to them and ask for help. If it's something that's not time sensitive, but it's important, and I can kick it down the road, I'll delay it and say, okay, well, maybe I'll do that next quarter. Maybe I'll just save that for next year, and I'll delay it. And if it's something that shouldn't have been on my freaking to-do list in the first place, it gets deleted. Just nope, not doing that. Don't care now. Even if it's something I'm going to do a few years from now, I don't care. Just delete it. Get it out of my face, right? And that simple process never takes me more than an hour, no matter how busy I am. And it always provides clarity. It always creates, using your language from before, it creates a day I can win after having several weeks where I felt like I was only losing, and it's not long. Anyone can do it. There are no extra steps that I did not mention here. It's really just writing down everything you do, assigning about how much time you're spending on it, thinking about urgency versus importance. And you can just Google Eisenhower matrix and see what that is. And then using the 4 Ds. Do I do this? Do I delay it? Do I delegate? Do I delete? Right? And that's it. And I've never seen it fail. I've prescribed that and suggested that, I don't know, hundreds of times. And if I include people who did Time Ninja, thousands of times. And anyone who's done it has been like, wow, I absolutely learned something about myself or about my tasks in the process. So yeah, that's how I almost always get back on track.
Yep. So does it stress you out that your schedule is so full that you can't do that till next week, knowing that we have
yes.
multiple work
yes.
days sitting between us and then? Because that stresses me out.
You 100%. Well, to be fair, I am, because of the holiday weekend, I am going to have some fun this weekend. So I feel like it's fine. I'm just going to get to the weekend, have a fun holiday weekend at the beach. And then coming next week, I'll sit down and try and get my shit together. And to be fair, this one on the grand scale and the grand scheme of underwaters, right? Of 10 being, oh my gosh, I might actually drown, and 1 being I'm happy as ever. I'm probably only where maybe a 6 at this moment, maybe 6 or 7, right? So I'm not, okay. It's not crazy. I'm starting to see that oh, my work quality is shrinking. My ability to do good work is crap. Even the things I like doing, I'm not having enough time for. And I want to spend time on them, So I'm trying to be a little proactive, and maybe in my advanced age, that's me getting better at this, right? Is me just recognizing a little earlier than I used to that this is coming and the water is rising, and getting a little bit ahead of it. It's still not perfect. And I'm not under the illusion that I'm someday never going to have this problem again, right? I think this is something that comes and goes with anyone who is stretching themselves. But if you're stretching yourself to achieve in any form of life, there's going to be moments where you reached too far, right? Where you took on too much. That's part of the game. I just hope I keep getting better at recognizing when I've overreached sooner, suffering as little as possible because of it, and getting back to a place that is a healthier, more balanced, whatever the adjective is.
Yeah. Learning yourself as you struggle through this current season of it, and then applying that the next time you come back. One of the things that you guys communicate in Time Ninja that does not present itself as an option to me is batching your email. As far as I know sure. Mark looks at his email at very specific parts of the day. But due to the way that we have set up our operation and the fact that our inbox in my gym is pretty much constantly filling, it's not something that I can say I'm going to only look at it these times a day. And it tends to be the thing that can kind of ominously stress me out if I lose control of it. So I guess I will give you my final thought that I have learned in recent seasons of this kind of overwhelm that one of the best ways to start a day that I'm going to win is to wake up just a little bit earlier than my wife and kids and give that 30 to 60 minutes of my time, and then close my laptop and not even come back to it until later in the morning when I get back. And I have already created some momentum for myself, and I go into that day feeling like I've already laid the groundwork for a successful day. And it kind of offsets the fact that I know I'm going to live in that email account with kind of one eye on it over the course of the day, as much as I know that's not a best case scenario in the eyes of yourself and Mark from a time management standpoint. That little tiny win pre-coffee is a game changer for me personally.
Yeah, I think it's a great takeaway, right? To just carve out some space where you can have a win early in the day, to feel like you spent some time with yourself, with your family, with on key tasks, right? Whatever that win looks like for you, I think that's huge. I probably will continue to challenge you on the email thing, but that's another podcast for another day. Sure. But I would say the same. I would say something very similar, which is which is the thing that I think I'm getting better at, I would encourage y'all to focus on, is to learn to recognize the early warning signs of overwhelm, burnout, too full a plate, right? And the early warning signs, at least for me, and you'll have to find out what they look like for you, dear listeners, is that my work quality starts to suffer. I'm a little bit annoyed sitting down at dinner at night, feeling like my day was just kind of like unsatisfying. Like I feel like I did not win the day. If anything, like the day maybe kicked me in the butt a little bit. Those are the things that when I start to feel that way sitting at dinner, I start to feel that way about the quality of my work. I'm starting to recognize that, many decades into thinking about this as like the early warning signs that I need to change something. And so I think I'll leave you listeners with that. Is like, think about that. Don't wait until you're actually drowning and need a life raft. See if you can't recognize that the tide is rising. See if you can't recognize a little earlier that your mood's changing, your quality of work shifting, that people are treating you differently, you're treating people differently, and I think that'll help you suffer as little as possible in overwhelm. Well, this was great. We're at 25 minutes. I'm gonna make us shut the heck up because we did it. I hope this was useful to you listeners. This was great, Pete. Thanks for jumping in, being candid as always about what's going on in our lives in real time. This is like turning into half podcast, half self-therapy sessions from time to time, but I like it. So
yeah, it's therapeutic for me. We can always do this. I'll admit to all the things I do wrong on a recording. Yes. I don't care.
Seriously, we could spend all of our podcasts just talking about the ways we're effed up. But dear listeners, let us know what you think. Email us, pete@businessunicorns.com, michael@businessunicorns.com. What do you want us to talk about on the coming podcasts? Certainly, we're happy to keep doing things like this, of course, but there's specific strategies or parts of the business that you want us to talk about or specific questions you want us to answer on air. Please don't be shy about emailing us. And again, share this podcast with your friends, fellow fitness business entrepreneurs, and review us on whatever platform that you're listening to the podcast. Thanks again, Pete. Have a great day. And listeners, I'll talk to you on the next one.
Talk to you.
Hi, it's Mark. I hope you loved today's show. Now, as you may know, due to overwhelming demand, our coaching group exclusively for brick and mortar training gym owners, the Unicorn Society, is sold out. Alas. However, we do plan to open up a handful of spots later this year. So here's what to do. If you're interested to learn more about the program, see if you qualify, and importantly, get on the list for priority consideration for future spots, head to businessunicorns.com/unicorn. One more time, that's businessunicorns.com/unicorn. See you next time.